The dream was a constant, but the sky was wrong. Professor Charles Xavier felt it every morning as he wheeled himself to the grand bay window of his study. It had been weeks since the indescribable shift, the violent, seamless tear in reality that had transplanted his school, his home, and the lives of every student within its walls. The grass on the lawn was the same shade of green, the scent of old books and floor wax in the mansion was the same, but the sky above Metropolis was a different blue. It was a brighter, more optimistic shade, filled with symbols he hadn't taught and gods he hadn't accounted for. This was a universe that already had saviors, beings of such immense power they were treated as living myths. And in a world that already knelt in awe of a god from Krypton, Xavier wondered, what place was there for a dream of humanity? His dream felt fragile here, an ideal forged in a world of street-level prejudice, now set against a backdrop of cosmic opera. He knew his X-Men felt it too. Logan's unease was a low growl in the psychic background, a primal instinct telling him the new territory was run by unfamiliar alphas. Scott's focus was sharper, more brittle, the pressure of protecting his found family in a land of titans weighing on him. And Jean felt the psychic noise of this new world as a constant, overwhelming chorus, a billion new thoughts and fears pressing in on her, with one voice that sang of hope so loudly it was almost painful. This world wasn't just new, it was louder, brighter, and infinitely more dangerous. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. Hope shines brightest in the darkest night. The alert from Cerebro was not a surprise. It was an inevitability, a sharp, piercing spike of pure, undiluted terror erupting from the heart of Metropolis. Scott, Aurora, Logan, we have one. Xavier's voice was calm, but carried the weight of command through their minds. A new awakening, uncontrolled. He's in Centennial Park. The fear is escalating his output. In LexCorp Tower, the view was pristine. Lex Luthor didn't look at the city, he surveyed it, a king from his glass castle. His private sensors, far more advanced than anything Star Labs publicly admitted to, flagged the energy surge instantly. It wasn't Kryptonian, not magical, not Speed Force. It was biological, chaotic, and most importantly, unregistered. On his Onyx desk, a holographic display bloomed, showing a thermal and bioenergy reading of the park. A boy, no older than 15, was on his knees at the center of a rapidly expanding crater near the base of the grand Superman statue. With every panicked sob, a wave of pure concussive force erupted from his body, turning soil to dust and cracking the marble foundation of the monument to his city savior. Biological origin and anomalous energy signature, Lex murmured to the empty room, a small predatory smile touching his lips. Well, it seems the planet's immune system is finally developing some interesting new antibodies. Down below, chaos reigned. The idyllic afternoon was a nightmare of screaming civilians and shattering pavement. The Blackbird, cloaked in a shimmering refraction field, was already hovering silently above the city. Scott, his hand on the cockpit glass, assessed the scene with a tactician's cold gaze. Jean, can you get a read? Fear. Pure terror. Jean Grey's voice was strained, her eyes closed in concentration. He thinks he's a monster. He can't stop it. He's not a monster. He's one of us. Scott's command cut through the cabin. Aurora, we need to contain the sound and the visual. Give us cover. Colossus, you're on civilian protection. Get them clear. Logan, perimeter. I don't want any surprises from the local authorities. Jean, you're with me. We need to talk him down. The jet's ramp lowered, and the response was a symphony of controlled power. From the clouds, a thick, impossibly dense fog rolled into the park, muffling the deafening sonic booms and obscuring the scene from news helicopters that were already swarming like vultures. The fog was cool and carried the scent of rain, a calming blanket from Storm, who descended like a goddess within it, her white hair a stark contrast to the gray mist. On the ground, Piotr Rasputin, his body shifting into gleaming organic steel with a series of heavy metallic thuds, became a living barricade, shielding a panicked family from a wave of force that would have crushed them. Wolverine landed in the shadows of the trees, a predator melting into the urban jungle. His senses were on fire. The kid's terror, the city's pollution, and something else. Something clean and powerful, like sunlight and ozone, watching from above. Scott and Jean moved through the fog, their blue and gold uniforms a beacon in the gloom. The boy Leo was rocking back and forth, his eyes squeezed shut. Stay away, I'll hurt you, he screamed, and another blast ripped through the earth. We're not going to hurt you, Leo, Jean projected, her mental voice a soft hand on a panicked heart. Liar, he shrieked, and the force wave slammed into Scott. Scott braced himself, visor glowing, but didn't fire. He took the hit, his boots digging furrows in the dirt. He was the unmovable object. The glasses I wear, Scott said, his voice firm and even, they stop me from hurting people.
The energy from my eyes could level this park. You are not alone in this. From his tower, Lex watched, utterly fascinated. He saw teamwork, precision, a trained paramilitary unit deploying with practiced efficiency. They weren't heroes performing for a crowd. They were soldiers on a mission. Isolate their genetic markers, he commanded his computer. I want to know everything about this X-gene. As Gene finally broke through the boy's psychic shields, calming him with shared images of the school, of other kids with strange and wonderful powers, the sonic pulses subsided. The fog began to thin. The immediate crisis was over, and that's when he arrived. There was no sound, no thunderous boom. One moment the sky was empty. The next, Superman was there, hovering 100 feet above them. He wasn't descending to attack. He was observing, a silent, powerful judgment cast over the scene. The sun glinted off the iconic red S on his chest, a symbol of hope that, to the X-Men, felt like a declaration of ownership. He landed softly, his red boots making no sound on the broken ground. His eyes, a piercing blue, weren't angry. They were concerned, but also filled with an authority that dwarfed Xavier's. He looked at the crater, at the terrified boy now being helped to his feet by Jean, and finally at Scott. I'm glad to see the situation is resolved. Superman's voice was calm, resonant, the voice of reason itself. But I have to ask, who are you? Scott stepped forward, placing himself between Superman and his team. He was a man standing before a god, but there was no fear in his stance, only resolve. We're the ones who handle our own problems, Scott replied, his tone clipped and professional. The boy is a mutant. His powers manifested for the first time. He's scared. We're taking him somewhere safe. Superman's gaze was unwavering. Somewhere safe? In my city, everyone is my responsibility. This boy needs help, not to be taken away by an unknown armed group. The tension was thick enough to taste. The symbol of this world's hope versus the pragmatic soldier of another stream. With all due respect, Scott said, the red quartz of his visor seeming to pulse with contained energy. You don't know the first thing about what he needs. We do. We are the X-Men, and we protect our own. He turned, signaling the team. It was time to go. Superman didn't move to stop them, but his gaze followed them, a silent promise that this conversation was far from over. High above, in his sterile office, Lex Luthor watched the X-Men escort the boy back toward their invisible jet. He didn't see saviors. He saw a disease, a genetic contagion with the power to rewrite the world's power balance. And for every disease, Lex knew, there had to be a cure, one he would control.
The darkness of the Batcave was a living thing, a familiar shroud woven from dripping water, the faint scent of ozone, and the hum of a computer that held the secrets of a world. Bruce Wayne sat before the massive central monitor, the light of the screen carving his cowl into stark planes of shadow and grim focus. He wasn't watching the news reports, he was dissecting them. Footage from a Wayne Enterprises satellite, cross-referenced with a hacked traffic camera, and a dozen shaky cell phone videos played out in silent, synchronized streams. The Metropolis incident. Alfred Pennyworth placed a cup of tea on the console, the quiet clink of porcelain on steel the only sound to Bruce's concentration. A rather eventful afternoon in the city of tomorrow, the butler remarked, his tone impeccably dry. It seems a localized fog bank and a spontaneous bit of urban renewal have stolen the headlines from Mr. Luthor's latest philanthropic gala. Bruce didn't respond. His fingers moved across a holographic interface, isolating frames, running spectral analyses on the energy signatures. The fog, he murmured, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. Barometric pressure dropped 15 degrees in a 10-block radius, localized, controlled, not magical in origin. The woman with the white hair, weather manipulation on a scale that rivals a lord of chaos, but the energy readings are biological. He switched feeds, focusing on the metallic giant. The man of steel. Isotope scans show no exotic alloys. It's organic transmutation. His flesh becomes the metal. Every detail was a piece of a puzzle he was assembling with terrifying speed. He had already dispatched a micro-drone to the park. It had collected soil samples from the crater, air quality readings, and residue from the strange scorched furrows Cyclops' boots had left behind. In a shielded chamber of the cave, the samples were being sequenced. They call themselves the X-Men, Bruce continued, his eyes narrowed. The leader, Cyclops, projects pure kinetic force from his eyes, except it's not kinetic. The energy readings are extra-dimensional. His eyes aren't projectors, they're apertures, portals to a universe of raw, concussive energy. They protected the civilians, Master Bruce, Alfred countered gently, and they rescued a terrified child from himself. They operated as a coordinated paramilitary unit with unknown capabilities and an unknown agenda, Bruce shot back, turning from the screen to face Alfred for the first time. The white lenses of his cowl seemed to burn with cold intensity. They are a faction, and they answer to no one.
The computer chimed, displaying the results from the genetic sequencer. Bruce turned back, his focus absolute. On the screen, a double helix spun, sections of it glowing with a bright, alien light. Text scrolled beside it. Marker, X gene, anomalous, latent, unpredictable activation, potential for unlimited variation. There it is, Bruce whispered. He zoomed in on the data. The boy's DNA, extracted from skin cells in the soil, was the key, and woven into it was this genetic bomb. It wasn't alien, it wasn't an infection, it was human, a mutation, a naturally occurring evolutionary divergence, and it was the most dangerous thing he had seen in a decade. The implications flooded his mind, a cascade of strategic nightmares, a power source that was biological, heritable, and could manifest as anything. One man could level a city block, a woman could command the weather, another could turn to living steel. How many more were there? How many ticking time bombs were walking the streets, unaware of the genetic code they carried? This wasn't like Superman, a singular, known quantity. This was an evolutionary arms race waiting to happen. Humanity itself was becoming a weapon. A priority alert flashed on the screen, an encrypted signal from the watchtower. Bruce accepted the call, and Superman's face appeared, his expression earnest and concerned. He was Clark Kent, not the symbol, reaching out to a friend. "Bruce, I saw it all," Clark began. "They were efficient, and they helped that boy. I think we should reach out, offer them a hand." "Offer them a hand." Bruce's voice was dangerously low. "We know nothing about them, Clark. Their leader challenged your authority in your own city. Their power source is a genetic anomaly we don't understand. Their school is a black site housing an unknown number of unregistered, weaponized individuals. They're not weapons, Bruce. They're people. Scared kids, from the sound of it." "A scared kid just tore up half of Centennial Park by accident," Bruce countered, his logic a cold, hard blade. "What does an angry one do? What does a dedicated, trained one do? We need to know what they're capable of. We need to know their weaknesses." "That's not the first step," Clark insisted, his Boy Scout morality clashing with Bruce's pragmatic paranoia. "The first step is a conversation. We show them they're not alone. We offer them an alliance. And when their leader decides our alliance is inconvenient, when one of their students loses control in the middle of Gotham, or when Lex Luthor or Darkseid decides to harvest them for their own ends, your trust is a liability, Clark. My preparation is a necessity." He ended the call, the silence of the cave pressing in again. Alfred stood by, his expression unreadable. He knew this look. He had seen it before the Tower of Babel incident, before the creation of Brother Eye. It was the look of a man who saw the end of the world and was willing to do anything to stop it. Bruce turned back to the main console. He created a new encrypted file, burying it under layers of security that would take a cod to crack. He labeled it simply Protocol X. He began to design. A schematic appeared on the screen, a high-frequency sonic emitter, tuned to disrupt a specific biological frequency for the transmuter, vibrate his organic steel apart at the molecular level. Another design took shape, a wide-spectrum psychic dampening field, based on salvaged Brainiac technology, for the telepath, create a bubble of pure mental static she can't breach. He pulled up the energy readings from Cyclops' visor, extra-dimensional aperture, refined red sun radiation emitters, focused into a crystalline matrix. It won't drain him like it does you, Clark. It will cauterize the portal, a permanent solution. For hours he worked, the shadow in the cave cataloging, analyzing, and building weapons against potential allies. He was not creating a plan to destroy the X-Men. He was creating a contingency, a fire extinguisher for a world he now saw was filled with hidden, evolving fire. He was the Batman, and he would be ready for the day their dream became everyone else's nightmare.
The air in Amanda Waller's control room at Belle Reve Penitentiary was stale, tasting of recycled oxygen, burnt coffee, and absolute authority. She stood before a wall of monitors, a short, formidable woman whose shadow seemed to loom larger than her physical form. On the main screen, the same footage from Centennial Park played on a loop. But where Superman saw people in need and Batman saw a strategic threat, Waller saw untapped potential. She saw soldiers. She saw assets. "They call themselves the X-Men," she said to the empty room, her voice a low, gravelly hum of calculation. "An independent organization of powered individuals operating on U.S. soil, answering to no one, with a stated goal of protecting their own kind." She took a slow sip of her coffee, the mug emblazoned with the Arguous Eagle. "In my world, we call that a rogue state." One of her analysts, a nervous man named Fitz, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, our deep-range sensors confirm their base of operations is a large shielded compound outside Metropolis. Initial scans show advanced technology, a private airfield, and it's populated almost entirely by minors. It's a school." "Don't be naive, Fitz," Waller said without turning.
A school is a place you learn history and algebra. A place that houses a private army, trains them to use their powers, and deploys them with military precision is a recruitment center. They're indoctrinating children into their ideology. Her gaze was fixed on the screen, on the disciplined way Cyclops commanded his team. But their ideology is their weakness. This Professor Xavier, whoever he is, he's selling them a dream. Coexistence. Acceptance. Hope. She scoffed. Hope doesn't win wars. Control does. She knew a direct assault on the mansion was suicide. The power levels displayed in the park were staggering. Weather manipulation, organic steel, concussive energy blasts, and that was just one squad. No, you don't fight an army like that head-on. You infect it from within. You find the one soldier who doubts the cause, who resents his uniform, and you offer him a new one. "Get me a list," she commanded. "Cross-reference arduous energy surveillance with social media chatter, missing persons reports. Find me a student at that school who is failing, one whose gift is a curse, one who is scared, isolated, and desperate for a purpose beyond passing exams and learning to smile at a world that hates him." 2 hours later, she had a name, Michael, a 16-year-old runaway from Keystone City. His X gene had manifested 2 months prior as anxiety-triggered pyrokinesis. The more stressed he became, the hotter his skin grew, until he would burst into uncontrollable blue flames. The X-Men had found him after he'd accidentally burnt down his foster home. He was exactly what she was looking for: damaged, powerful, and terrified of himself. In the deepest, most secure block of Belle Reve, the cell door hissed open. Floyd Lawton, Deadshot, didn't look up from cleaning his wrist-mounted magnums. "Whatever it is, the answer's no," he grunted. "It's not a suicide mission, Lawton," Waller's voice came from a speaker in the ceiling. "It's a job interview. You're the recruiter." A file slid through a slot in a door. Deadshot picked it up. Inside was a picture of Michael and a schematic of the Xavier Institute. "You want me to walk into a fortress full of super freaks and talk to a kid?" "I want you to offer him a better option," Waller corrected. "This place," and her voice dripped with disdain, "wants to teach him to control his power, to suppress it, to be safe. They're putting a god in a straitjacket and telling him it's for his own good. I, on the other hand, want to give him a target, a purpose, a reason to let the fire out." "And what's in it for me?" Deadshot asked, already knowing the answer. "Another 5 years off your sentence, and a bonus to your daughter's trust fund big enough to buy her a pony that shoots diamonds." Deadshot stood up, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You should have led with the pony." That night, the grounds of the Xavier Institute were quiet. Logan was on his usual patrol, his senses scanning the perimeter, but he was looking for armies, for jets, for the heavy hitters. He wasn't looking for one man, moving like a ghost through the gaps in the trees, wearing a suit that baffled thermal and infrared sensors. Deadshot moved with the patient certainty of a master hunter. He scaled the stone wall, bypassed a laser grid with practiced ease, and slipped through an unlocked window in the gymnasium. He found Michael in the danger room observation deck long after a training session had ended. He was staring at the holographic battlefield where he'd lost control again, his simulation ending in a field of digital flames and the disapproving look of his instructor, Colossus. He radiated failure. "Tough day at the office?" Michael jumped, spinning around to see a man in a red and gray tactical suit, a white helmet with a cybernetic eye gleaming in the low light. Before Michael could scream, before the heat could rise in his skin, Deadshot held up a hand. "Easy, kid. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to make you an offer." "Who are you?" Michael stammered, backing away. "Someone who gets it," Deadshot said, his voice calm and disarmingly reasonable. He leaned against the console. "They tell you it's a gift, right? But it doesn't feel like one. It feels like a curse. Something you have to chain down every second of every day, or else you hurt people. Or worse, you disappoint the people trying to save you." The words hit Michael like a physical blow. It was everything he felt, spoken by a stranger. "The professor, he wants you to find peace," Deadshot continued, his tone conversational. "My boss, she doesn't care if you're peaceful. She cares if you're effective. She's not offering you a classroom. She's offering you a purpose, a target, a chance to point all that fire you've got bottled up at people who actually deserve it." He slid a simple black business card across the console. "You're a weapon, kid. Stop letting them teach you how to be a paperweight." Michael stared at the card. It was blank, save for a single silver circuit trace. "Press your thumb to it," he instructed. "It'll dissolve. We'll know, and we'll come get you. No more tests, no more disappointed looks. Just a mission and a paycheck." He turned and walked back into the shadows. "The choice is yours." A moment later, he was gone. Michael was left alone in the silence, his heart pounding. The business card felt warm in his hand. Down on the lawn, Logan sniffed the air, his head cocked. He smelled gunpowder and professionalism. An intruder. He was too late. The scent was already gone, carried away on the night wind. Inside, Xavier's mind briefly brushed against Michael's, sensing a maelstrom of conflict. He mistook it for the lingering frustration of a failed training exercise. He didn't feel the cold, pragmatic logic that had just been injected into his school, a poison that threatened to turn his dream of a safe haven into a breeding ground for a...
The psychic dialogue began with a delicate probe, a tentative tendril of thought reaching across the vast, noisy expanse of the DC universe. Professor Charles Xavier, seated in his cerebro chamber, his mind a finely tuned instrument, found the signature he sought. It was a beacon of unparalleled strength and purity, a mental presence as vast and radiant as the yellow sun it drew its power from, Superman. He initiated the contact gently, weaving his intentions into the fabric of his thought, ensuring it was an invitation, not an intrusion. "Kal-El?" Xavier projected, his mental voice calm, resonant, carrying the wisdom of decades. "My name is Charles Xavier. I believe we have much to discuss." Clark Kent was in the Daily Planet bullpen, typing furiously, a half-eaten Danish beside his keyboard. The voice echoed not in his ears, but directly in the core of his consciousness, startling him so profoundly he almost crushed his keyboard. He looked around instinctively, but no one else reacted. It was a purely internal communication. "Who is this?" Clark thought back, his mental voice a wave of mild alarm, instantly followed by a powerful curiosity. He had encountered telepaths before, Martian Manhunter, specific alien races, but never one with such clarity, such reach, or such an utterly human touch. "I am the headmaster of the Xavier Institute," Charles replied, a subtle image of the mansion and its grounds nestled beneath the metropolitan skyline forming in Clark's mind. "My students were involved in an incident in Centennial Park yesterday. I understand you had questions." Clark mentally replayed the scene, the disciplined team, the boys' uncontrolled power, the defiant stance of Cyclops. "Yes, many questions. Most importantly, why did you refuse my help? We are here to help everyone." Xavier's mental sigh was palpable. "Because, Kal-El, everyone has never included us. Not truly, not in the way we need. You are a symbol, a god among men, and your intentions are beyond reproach. But your world's reaction to difference, to powers it cannot categorize or control, that is a far more complex matter." A moment of silence, then Clark's thoughtful reply. "You speak of fear. I have known fear. The fear of being an alien, of being too powerful. And you wear a symbol of hope. You stand in the light. Your origin is cosmic, your powers divine. Our origin is terrestrial. Our powers, an evolutionary accident," Xavier countered. "The world you protect already struggles with the concept of one alien god. How do you imagine it will react to an entire nascent species of humans, each with powers as varied and potentially destructive as your own, born from their own ranks?" Clark recoiled, a wave of genuine concern emanating from him. That's not how it has to be. We can teach them, integrate them. Integrate them into what, Kal-El? A world that already builds prisons for metahumans? A world where a man like Lex Luthor demonizes anything he cannot control? A world where a woman like Amanda Waller sees every powered individual as a disposable asset? Xavier's mental voice hardened slightly, a steel beneath the silk. "My dream is not merely to teach my students to control their powers. It is to teach them to survive, to thrive, to build a future where they are not merely tolerated, but accepted. And that acceptance must be earned, not dictated by the most powerful among us." "So you refuse to work with the Justice League?" Clark's mental query was tinged with disappointment. "We refuse to be absorbed," Xavier corrected. "We are not your sidekicks, Kal-El. We are not another branch of the Justice League. We are a separate, distinct people. We will defend this world when it is threatened, as we always have. But our primary responsibility is to our own kind, to these children who have been born into a world that fears their very existence." Clark mentally pictured the terrified boy in the park, the one the X-Men had so deftly calmed. He understood the truth in Xavier's words, a truth that mirrored his own struggle for acceptance on Earth, but magnified by the sheer number of those Xavier protected. He understood the X-Men's self-reliance, even if it chafed against his own instincts to gather all good people under the banner of the League. "Lex Luthor," Clark projected, a warning. "He is aware of you. He is dangerous. He plays on fear." "We are well acquainted with his type, Kal-El," Xavier replied, a note of weariness in his tone. "We have faced men who promised a cure for our existence.
who incited hatred, who built sentinels. Luthor is merely a more polished, more powerful version of the same old enemy. And Batman, Clark continued, his mental image of Bruce a sharp contrast to Xavier's calm. Xavier's mental presence wavered slightly, a brief flash of something akin to grim understanding. The Dark Knight? Yes. I felt the probing, the suspicion. He seeks to categorize, to neutralize. He sees a threat where I see a people. A pause. He is not so different from some of our own more radical factions, the ones who believe humanity is beyond saving. We are not enemies, Professor, Clark stated, projecting a wave of sincere goodwill. I believe that. I want to believe that. Then prove it, Kal-El, Xavier challenged softly. Prove that your world is ready for us. Prove that your hope extends to those who are not simply alien, but merely different. The psychic connection began to fade, a deliberate withdrawal by Xavier. We will not seek to harm your world, Kal-El, but we will not allow our people to be harmed either. Do not mistake our restraint for weakness, or our desire for peace for a lack of resolute. And then, silence. Clark was left alone in the noisy bullpen, the sounds of keyboards and chattering colleagues rushing back in, an almost physical weight after the profound intimacy of the psychic exchange. He sat there, staring at his half-eaten Danish, a new, unsettling understanding settling over him. Xavier had not just introduced himself, he had drawn a line, a boundary around his people, distinct from the Justice League, distinct from humanity. He was not asking for help, he was asking for respect. And in a world where Superman often received worship, respect for a perceived subordinate species was a far more difficult commodity to come by. He had sensed the professor's wisdom, his deeply held conviction, but he had also felt the immense, raw power of Jean Grey, a psychic signature that hummed with something primal and cosmic, far beyond even John Jones's abilities, and he had felt the unyielding will of Cyclops, a man who would stand against a god for his family. Superman realized that this was not merely a new team of heroes, this was a nation in nascent form, an evolutionary leap for humanity, with all the potential for conflict and transformation that implied. And for the first time in a long time, the Man of Steel felt a tremor of uncertainty, not for himself, but for the future of the world he had sworn to protect. The X-Men had arrived, not to join, but to stand apart, and the universe, Clark knew, would have to decide what to do with them.
The scent of Gotham was different from anything Logan had ever known. It wasn't the pristine, antiseptic air of Metropolis, nor the wild, untamed pine of the Canadian Rockies. Gotham was a symphony of decay, stale rain on broken concrete, the metallic tang of old blood, the reek of cheap booze and desperation, overlaid with the cloying sweetness of fresh garbage. It was a city that wore its scars like badges, and Logan understood that. This was a place where things were earned through struggle, not gifted by a benevolent sun. He was looking for Michael, the pyrokinetic kid from Keystone, who had vanished from the school overnight. A small, black, featureless card had been found on his bed, dissolving into nothing when Kitty Pryde had accidentally brushed it. Xavier's mind had been a maelstrom of disappointment and concern. Logan had just grunted. Kids run. They always do. But this one had been recruited. His tracking skills, honed over centuries, were a primitive art in a high-tech world, but they were infallible. Michael's unique scent, sulfur, fear, and a subtle electrical hum led him directly into the labyrinthine alleys of the East End. Here, the streetlights were shattered, the shadows long and menacing, and the only light came from flickering neon signs that promised sin and oblivion. He heard the whispers first, gutter punk slang mixed with something sharper, more aggressive. Firestarter. Devil Boy. Michael was cornered in a grimy alley, his back pressed against a wall covered in graffiti that screamed both anarchy and despair. His skin was glowing with an internal heat, blue flames licking at his fingertips, barely contained. 3 hardened street thugs, their faces obscured by ski masks, advanced on him, crude weapons in hand. One held a broken bottle, another a lead pipe, the third a switchblade. "You burned down that corner store, didn't you, freak?" the one with the pipe snarled. "Cost us our take. Now you're gonna pay for it." Michael whimpered, shaking his head. "I didn't mean to. I can't stop it." The flames around his hands intensified, scorching the brick behind him. "Well, you're gonna stop it now," the thug with the bottle lunged. Before he could reach Michael, a shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness.
It moved with impossible speed, a blur of leather and red. A gloved hand snatched the bottle midair, then twisted, slamming the thug's head against the wall with a sickening crack. The man slumped to the ground unconscious. The other two froze, then turned, their eyes wide with fear as they saw the figure. He was clad in blood-red armor over a black suit, with a distinctive red helmet that hid his face completely, giving him the appearance of a demon. A pair of semi-automatic pistols were already drawn, aimed with chilling precision at their heads. "All right, scumbags," the figure growled, his voice distorted by a modulator, a cold, detached menace in his tone. "Party's over. Leave the kid alone." Logan, hidden deeper in the shadows, recognized the modus operandi instantly. A vigilante. A killer. The scent of gunpowder and blood was thick around him. This ain't no Boy Scout. The two remaining thugs, clearly experienced in Gotham's brutal hierarchy, recognized the Red Helmet. Red Hood. They dropped their weapons and raised their hands. "Hey, Red Hood, easy. We're just dealing with a fire problem." "Your fire problem is my problem now," Red Hood said, not lowering his weapons. "Get out. And if I see you in this alley again, you won't be walking out." They scrambled away, tripping over each other in their haste. Red Hood turned his attention to Michael, who was still trembling, his hands glowing. "You okay, kid?" Red Hood's voice was less aggressive now, but still devoid of any real warmth. Michael nodded, the flames on his hands flickering. He stopped them. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Red Hood replied, holstering his pistols with fluid movements. "You brought this on yourself, showing off your little light show in my neighborhood. This isn't Metropolis. You get noticed here, you get hurt. Or worse, you get used." He kicked a loose brick. "So where'd you learn to play with fire, Sparky?" Michael hesitated, then muttered, "The school, the Xavier Institute." But I laughed. I couldn't control it, and they just wanted me to suppress it, like it was a disease. Red Hood laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Control it? Suppress it? That's what they always say, isn't it? The do-gooders. They want you to fit into their neat little boxes, play by their rules. This power isn't a disease, kid. It's a goddamn weapon, so learn how to use it." He pointed out a rusty dumpster. "See that? Point your hand. Set it on fire." Michael stared at the dumpster, then back at Red Hood. I can't. What if I hurt someone? There's no one else here, just you and me, and a lot of garbage. Stop being scared of what you are. Embrace it. You think Batman gets anything done by being afraid of the darkness? Hell no, he is the darkness. So if you're fire, kid, then burn. Something clicked in Michael's mind. The words were a brutal echo of Deadshot's offer, but delivered with an intensity that resonated with his own frustrated rage. He focused, not on fear, but on the anger that had been simmering beneath the surface. The anger at being a freak, at hurting people, at running away. His hands flared, the blue flames roaring to life, hotter, bigger. He aimed at the dumpster, and a controlled stream of pure blue fire erupted, instantly incinerating the metal with a roar. Michael stared, wide-eyed, at the smoldering remains. He had done it. He hadn't lost control. He had wielded it. "See?" Red Hood's voice was almost approving. "Now you're getting it." Logan stepped out of the shadows, claws extended with a snick. The sound was deafening in the suddenly quiet alley. Red Hood whirled, his pistols back in his hands, targeting Logan's chest. "All right, bub, that's enough lessons for one night," Logan snarled, his eyes fixed on Red Hood's helmet. "The kid's coming with me." "Who the hell are you?" Red Hood snapped, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Another one of Xavier's choir boys, trying to put the kid back in his cage? He ain't a weapon to be pointed, and he ain't a monster to be locked up," Logan retorted, advancing slowly, the moonlight glinting off his adamantium claws. "He's a kid, and he belongs at the school, not in some government black ops squad, or getting taught how to be a damn street thug." Red Hood's helmet tilted. "You know about the offer? Waller's offer? We know a lot of things, including how to break people like you." Logan's voice was a low growl. "You want to play rough? I can play rougher, but the kid stays out of it." "I'm not playing, old man," Red Hood said, his voice cold. "I'm saving this kid from the same mistakes I made, from trusting men who tell you they know what's best for you." He glanced at Michael. "You still want to run back to the professor, kid, or do you want to learn how to really use what you've got?" Michael stared at the glowing blue embers of the dumpster, then back at Logan, whose claws were still extended. He remembered the strict rules, the constant fear of losing control at the school. He remembered the disappointment in Colossus's eyes, and he remembered the fear in his foster parents' eyes just before his powers had erupted and taken everything from him. Here, Red Hood wasn't asking him to suppress, he was asking him to burn. I don't know, Michael stammered, his eyes wide with confusion and a nascent sense of power. Exactly, Red Hood said, a cynical twist to his voice. Kid's clearly traumatized. He needs more than your soft glove approach, Wolverine. He needs focus, discipline, and a little less of that we are the world BS. Logan sprang, moving faster than Red Hood expected. His claws slashed, forcing the vigilante to dodge with preternatural speed, firing off 2 rounds that Logan deflected with a clang of adamantium against both. The fight was a blur of steel, gunshots, and primal fury. Logan was a whirlwind of slashing claws, Red Hood a dance of precise, lethal strikes, using the environment to his advantage, his martial arts clearly influenced by the same master as Batman. He saw the rage in Logan's eyes, a mirrored reflection of his own. This wasn't just a fight over a kid, it was a clash of philosophies. Logan fought to protect Michael's innocence, Red Hood fought to forge him into a survivor. Michael watched, mesmerized and terrified. The 2 men were brutal, efficient, one a primal force of nature, the other a cold, calculated weapon. The air crackled with their conflicting ideologies. Finally, Logan landed a glancing blow, his claws tearing a shallow gash in Red Hood's shoulder armor. Red Hood grunted, staggering back. He knew he couldn't win a long, prolonged fight against adamantium. He looked at Michael. Kid, whatever you choose, you better make damn sure it's your choice, not theirs. He vanished into the shadows, a ghost in the Gotham night, leaving behind only the scent of ozone and the lingering tang of gunsmoke. Logan turned to Michael, his claws retracting with a hiss. Kid, we're going home. Michael looked at the ruined dumpster, at his still warm hands, then back at Logan's weary, battle-hardened face. He saw protection, but he also saw restraint. Red Hood had offered something else entirely, something tempting and terrifying. I don't know where home is anymore, Michael whispered, tears welling in his eyes. He had tasted power, and he had tasted purpose, and he feared he couldn't go back to just being safe. Logan placed a heavy hand on his shoulder, a rare, gentle gesture. Kid, we'll figure it out, together. But as they walked out of the alley and deeper into the Gotham night, Logan knew the battle for Michael's soul was far from over, and the X-Men were now on the radar of a whole new kind of justice, one that blurred the lines between hero and villain, and embraced the very darkness Xavier sought to fight.
Section 6. The Danger Room was an arena of controlled chaos designed to push mutants to their limits in a safe environment. But today, the training exercise for Jean Grey was anything but controlled. Professor Xavier was pushing her, urging her to expand her mental reach, to filter the overwhelming psychic noise of this new universe, to truly feel the tapestry of consciousness woven into DC's reality. He had hoped it would help her adapt, to find her place in this bewildering new world. Instead, it was unraveling her. Holographic projections of apocalyptic parademons swarmed the chamber, their energy blasts crackling around Jean. She floated at the center of the simulated battlefield, her eyes glowing faintly with psychic energy, telekinetically crushing and incinerating the digital foes with casual ease. But her focus wasn't on the battle. Her mind was stretched, pushed beyond its breaking point, trying to discern patterns in the vast ocean of new thoughts she was exposed to. The alien logic of a Green Lantern far across the cosmos, the dark, brooding silence of a certain Gotham detective, the radiant hope of a Kryptonian, and something else, something ancient, something vast, something that hummed at the very edge of reality, a power that felt both alien and intimately connected to creation itself. Focus, Jean, Xavier's mental voice urged, calm but insistent, from the observation booth. Filter the noise. Find the core signature. But the noise was too much. The universe was screaming at her. The echoes of dying stars, the whispers of forgotten gods, the silent, terrible song of the anti-life equation far off in the void. And then a new chord struck, a discordant, impossible note that ripped through her psychic defenses like a razor blade. It was a raw, primal energy, a flicker of cosmic fire that tasted of creation and destruction, of all things and nothingness. A brilliant, all-consuming flare of red and gold energy erupted from Jean, ripping through the Danger Room's holographic emitters. The entire chamber short-circuited, plunging into darkness. A surge of raw psionic force, unfiltered and immense,
lashed out from the Xavier Institute, a mental scream that echoed across the continental United States and beyond. Miles away, in the Tower of Fate, Kent Nelson, Dr. Fate, felt it first. The helmet of Nabu, ancient and wise, pulsed with alarm. Fate was engaged in a deep meditative trance, communing with the Lords of Order, when the psychic wave struck. It wasn't just a mental projection, it was a ripple in the fabric of magic itself, a tearing sound in the veil between dimensions. Fate's vision, typically serene, flared with a chaotic maelstrom of cosmic fire. He saw a nascent entity, a phoenix of raw psychic power stirring within a human mind, and he saw it turning its gaze outwards, a nascent spark of the great cosmic fire that had been responsible for untold destruction across countless realities. A warning, Nabu's voice boomed in his mind. The Phoenix Force stirs. It is a child of the cosmos, but a destroyer of worlds. It must not awaken here. This reality cannot sustain its full power. Dr. Fate, cloaked in his Ankin-blazed suit, rose, his movements deliberate. The Lords of Order had already been uneasy about the X-Men's anomalous arrival, a wrinkle in destiny Nabu had struggled to fully interpret. Now this. He began to chant, his voice resonating with ancient power, preparing to project a magical barrier, a metaphysical firewall to contain the psychic rupture. Meanwhile, in her ornate apartment in Washington, D.C., Zatanna Zatara was in the middle of a conjuring, a delicate illusion for a private show later that week. The psychic flare hit her like a physical blow, disrupting her concentration, sending the glowing doves she had conjured scattering into motes of light. Her head snapped up, her hand instinctively went to her temple. She felt the searing pain, the immense power, and the sheer impossibility of what she was sensing. This wasn't just a powerful telepath. This was something beyond metahuman, beyond even most magical beings. It was a raw, untamed force that sang with the energy of creation and destruction. "What was that, Z?" her stage assistant, a young woman named Misty, asked, startled by Zatanna's sudden distress. Zatanna ignored her, already walking towards her magical wardrobe, her voice a low murmur, speaking backwards. "Eam es nes, never have I felt such power." She pulled out her top hat and wand, her expression grim. Eth el heel grent chest, pin it sirs her perception of reality. She knew the name, Phoenix. It was a whisper in some of the oldest magical texts, a cosmic entity of immense power that periodically ignited in sentient beings across the multiverse, capable of both creation and utter annihilation. But it belonged to another reality, a separate cosmic framework. For it to manifest here, it could unravel everything. Back at the Xavier Institute, the danger room was slowly rebooting. Jean lay unconscious, cradled in the arms of Scott, who had burst in the moment the power went out. Xavier was beside them, his hand on Jean's forehead, sending calming thoughts, his own mind reeling from the raw, unbridled energy he had just witnessed. He had glimpsed it too, that cosmic fire, lurking just beneath the surface of Jean's consciousness. He had pushed her too far. He had inadvertently prodded a dormant cosmic entity from another universe into awakening in this one. Storm knelt beside them, her hand pressed to Jean's chest. Her vital signs are stable, Charles, but her mind, it feels like a star that has suddenly ignited. "It is far more than that, Aurora," Xavier said, his voice strained. "We have touched something ancient, something cosmic, something that does not belong here." Kitty Pryde, having phased through the wall in a panic, gasped as she saw Jean. "What happened? Is she okay?" Scott looked up, his face etched with worry. She's not herself, Kitty. Professor, what was that?" It was a glimpse of a power so vast, so primordial, it almost defies comprehension, Scott. Xavier explained, his gaze distant, seeing beyond the walls of the chamber. "It is a force that has woven itself into Jean's very being, a remnant of a reality we thought we had left behind, and now it has announced its presence to this universe." He knew that if Dr. Fate, the greatest magical protector of this realm, or Zatanna, one of its most powerful sorceresses, had felt it, then it was no longer merely a problem for the X-Men. It was a cosmic event, an anomaly that could rewrite the very laws of reality. The X-Men had arrived as a new species, a new people. Now they brought with them a potential apocalypse. Outside the shielded walls of the danger room, a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer of gold light appeared in the sky above the Institute. It hovered for a moment, a vigilant, watchful presence, before fading. Dr. Fate had cast his barrier, the Lords of Order had taken notice, and the X-Men, in their quest to protect their own, had just brought the attention of the universe's most powerful mystical forces down upon their school. Jean stirred, her eyes fluttering open. They were still glowing, a faint internal fire. She looked at Scott, then at Xavier, a deep, unsettling wisdom in her gaze. "I felt it, Charles," she whispered, her voice ethereal. "The fire, it's hungry, and it knows its home."
The public reveal of LexCorp's metahuman gene therapy was a spectacle of calculated brilliance, aired live from a gleaming white stage at Luthor Tower. Lex Luthor, impeccable in a tailored suit, stood before a cheering crowd and a battery of news cameras, the embodiment of human ingenuity and compassion. Behind him, a massive holographic display showcased complex DNA strands, glowing and shifting, culminating in the triumphant image of a healthy, normal human cell. For too long, Luthor's voice boomed, resonating with a carefully crafted blend of empathy and scientific authority. Humanity has lived in the shadow of the unknown, fearful of the next uncontrolled power surge, the next devastating display from individuals who, through no fault of their own, pose an existential risk to life as we know it. He paused, allowing the murmurs of agreement to ripple through the audience. But today, he continued, a triumphant smile gracing his lips, LexCorp is proud to announce a breakthrough, not a weapon, but a solution, a safe, ethical, and completely voluntary gene therapy that can effectively cure these so-called metahuman and now mutant abilities. It reestablishes normal human physiology, allowing individuals to live lives free from the burden of uncontrolled powers, free from the fear of harming others, and free from the prejudice that so often accompanies their unique conditions. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause. Here was a man offering choice, safety, and a return to normalcy. He was offering a way out of the fear, a way to put the genie back in the bottle. He was offering an alternative to the X-Men's insistence on embracing difference. At the Xavier Institute, the television in the common room was quickly muted by Kitty Pryde, her face pale. The X-Men and their students watched in stunned silence, a cold dread settling in the pit of their stomachs. "A cure," Scott Summers said, his voice flat, his hands clenched into fists. "This is how it begins," Storm whispered, her eyes stormy, reflecting the growing anger in the room. Jean Grey, still recovering from her Danger Room incident, felt a wave of psychic disgust emanate from every mutant in the room. She also felt something else, something deeply disturbing from Luthor. Beneath the veneer of compassion, his mind was a viper's nest of contempt and a chillingly precise calculation. This wasn't about a cure, it was about control and destruction. Professor Xavier, watching from his study, felt a familiar weariness. "The human condition, Scott," he sighed, "is often defined by its fear of the unknown. Luthor merely exploits that fear, twisting it into a false promise of security. This is not a cure, my X-Men. This is a threat." Indeed, in the heavily shielded research labs deep within Luthor Tower, the reality of the metahuman gene therapy was far more sinister. Dr. Elena Petrova, a brilliant but morally compromised geneticist, worked feverishly, surrounded by beakers of glowing serums and humming centrifuges. The holographic display showed not a single benign DNA strand, but a complex multi-vectored retrovirus. "Sir, the mutagenic vectors are complete," Dr. Petrova reported into a secure comlink. "The delivery system is nearing completion. It targets the specific X gene sequence we isolated from the Centennial Park incident. It will destabilize cellular integrity, causing rapid calcification of cellular walls and organ failure in any identified mutant cell. Non-mutants will experience only mild flu-like symptoms." "Excellent, Doctor," Luthor's voice purred through the comm. "How long until we can begin aerosol deployment?" "With our current atmospheric dispersers, we could target the known location of the Xavier Institute within 48 hours, sir," she replied, a faint tremor in her voice. Even she, a woman accustomed to dark science, felt a chill at the sheer scale of the intended genocide. 48 hours, Luthor mused, a cruel smile on his face. "Perfect. We let their hope fester for another day. Then we eradicate the problem, and I will be hailed as the savior of humanity, not the man who created the problem, as Superman so often implies. He had meticulously designed it. The initial public announcement would gain widespread support. Any attempt by the X-Men to fight back would be seen as an act of aggression from dangerous, uncontrolled individuals who rejected a humanitarian cure. He would turn public opinion into a weapon, justifying the eradication before it even happened." Back at the Institute, Logan paced, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "We ain't gonna sit here and let him do this, are we, Chuck? Cure us. I'll cure his face with my claws." "Violence is precisely what he wants, Logan," Guy Cypress countered, his tone grim. "He wants us to confirm his narrative, to prove his fear-mongering right." "So what then, Scott?" Kitty demanded, her voice tight with panic. "We just let him release a plague that targets us. We just let him cure us out of existence." Xavier, his expression resolute, wheeled himself to the front of the room. "No, we will not. We will defend ourselves, but we will do so strategically. We must neutralize the threat before it is deployed. We must ensure this cure never sees the light of day, but we cannot allow the world to see us as the monsters he portrays." He looked at Scott, then at Jean. "Scott, I need you to lead a strike team, stealth and precision. Your objective, infiltrate LexCorp Tower, locate the primary research lab, and destroy
every trace of this so-called therapy before he can implement his plan. Scott nodded, his jaw set. Who's with he? I am, Jean said, stepping forward. Her eyes still held a faint inner light. A remnant of the phoenix is stirring, but her resolute was absolute. My telepathy can bypass their security, and my telekinesis can dismantle their labs from the inside out. I'm in, Professor, Colossus rumbled, stepping forward, his metal form ready for anything, to protect my people. And I, Storm declared, her voice ringing with authority, will ensure that if LexCorp attempts to deploy any airborne agent, it will be met with a hurricane force scale that renders it inert. My weather control will protect the Institute. Xavier nodded, a spark of hope in his eyes despite the gravity of the situation. Then the time for talk is over. The time for action is now. We will show this world that we are not afraid to be who we are, and we will fight for our right to exist, not with violence against humanity, but with resolute defense against those who seek to extinguish us. Little did they know, their carefully planned counteroffensive, born of righteous indignation and the instinct for self-preservation, was about to collide with a far more ancient and terrifying evil, a cosmic predator who had already set its sights on the unique genetic bounty the X-Men represented. The cure for mutants was about to become the least of their worries. Darkseid was coming.
From his throne on Apokolips, a world forged in fire and tyranny, Darkseid watched. His eyes, burning with Omega energy, pierced the vast distances of space and the veils between dimensions. He had sensed the anomaly for weeks, a sudden, concentrated surge of biological power within a previously uninteresting sector of a minor universe. At first, it was a curiosity, a blip on the cosmic radar. Now, it was a resource. He had observed the X gene, a naturally occurring mutation that granted mortals extraordinary abilities. He had seen the humans, these mutants, wielding powers that mimicked his new gods in their raw potential. Weather manipulation, mental dominion, organic transmutation, these were not random flukes. These were nascent abilities, signs of a developing evolutionary strain that, if properly cultivated, could serve his ultimate purpose. The anti-life equation was his goal, but a truly potent army, an elite guard of genetically superior, utterly subservient warriors, was a valuable stepping stone. Darkseid's face, a craggy landscape of obsidian, betrayed no emotion. "Granny goodness," he rumbled, his voice a cosmic earthquake that reverberated through the very stone of his throne room. "The new spawn. They display unique potential, a blend of biological adaptability and raw power. They would make excellent additions to my Furies. Or, if recalcitrant, excellent material for genetic experimentation. Granny Goodness, a corpulent, sadistic taskmaster with a grotesque smile and an iron will, bowed low. As you command, my lord, the X-Men, they fight for coexistence. Such foolish sentiment. I shall teach them the true meaning of obedience. They will learn to serve the one true God. Bring me the strong ones," Darkseid ordered, his Omega eyes focusing on holographic images of Jean Grey and Storm, the female who commands the elements, the one who wields the mind like a weapon. They shall be remade in the image of Apokolips. He also saw Wolverine, his adamantium claws, his primal ferocity. And the feral one. He has spirit. I shall break it, and then forge him anew. Granny Goodness grinned, a horrifying rictus. The Furies shall go forth, my lord. They shall bring you your new toys. She turned, her heavy boots clanking on the metallic floor, and gathered her chosen warriors. Lashina, with her electro-whips, a cruel gleam in her eyes. Stampa, a hulkule brute with anti-gravity boots and a penchant for crushing. Mad Harriet, a psychotic whirlwind of razor-sharp claws. And Big Barda, taller and more honorable than the others, but still bound to Darkseid's will. This would not be a mere skirmish. This would be a harvest. Back on Earth, the X-Men were finalizing their plans. Cyclops, Jean, and Colossus were preparing for their infiltration of LexCorp Tower. Storm was honing her weather control, ready to intercept any aerosol attack. Logan was on high alert, his senses prickling with an unknown dread. Suddenly, a massive boom tube erupted on the lawn of the Xavier Institute. The sky ripped open, disgorging a wave of paradiamonds, hulking, winged shock troops with razor-sharp claws and teeth, their battle cries echoing across the peaceful grounds.
They were followed by the imposing figures of the female Furies, led by Granny Goodness herself. The initial assault was overwhelming. The Parademons, mindless and numerous, swarmed the lawn, tearing at the ancient trees and blasting holes in the manicured hedges. Students, caught unawares in their various activities, screamed in terror as the grotesque creatures descended. "To me, my X-Men!" Xavier's mental command, laced with urgency and power, reverberated through every mutant mind on the grounds. Cyclops, already in his uniform, instinctively took command. "Defensive positions, protect the students." His optic blast sliced through the first wave of Parademons, incinerating them in midair. Storm ascended, a whirlwind of fury. "You will not touch my students." Her eyes flashed, and lightning crackled from her fingertips, arcing through the Parademons, turning them into ash. A localized blizzard erupted, coating the lawn in ice and sleet, slowing the creature's advance. Colossus, a towering figure of gleaming steel, became a living shield, deflecting Parademon blasts and smashing through their ranks with powerful blows. Kitty Pryde phased through a charging Parademon, causing it to stumble through her, then solidified, kicking it violently into another. Jean Grey, her mental defenses strained but resolute, psychically tore apart dozens of Parademons, turning their own fear against them, crushing their minds with unseen force. But she also felt Granny Goodness's mind, a cruel, calculating intelligence that was probing, assessing. Granny Goodness, a twisted smile on her lips, observed the chaos. "Ah, the little sprites have spunk, such raw power. Lashina, Stumpa, Mad Harriet, bring me the Storm Witch and the Mind Witch, break the Feral one. The rest are for training." Lashina's electro-whips cracked through the air, snaking around Storm's limbs, sending jolts of pure pain through her. Stampa, with a terrifying roar, stomped the ground, sending a shockwave that rattled the entire mansion, momentarily stunning Colossus. Mad Harriet, a cackling blur of knives, engaged Wolverine, whose claws raked against her armored body, sending sparks flying. This wasn't an invasion to conquer, it was a raiding party to capture. Meanwhile, Michael, the pyrokinetic, watched from his dormitory window, paralyzed by fear. The chaos outside, the sounds of battle, the screams at his fellow students, it was too much. The heat began to rise in his skin, the familiar blue flames licking at his hands. He was terrified. Terrified he would lose control. Terrified he would hurt someone. But then he saw it. A Parademon grabbing a smaller student, dragging them towards the boom tube that still shimmered on the lawn. Something snapped inside him. Not fear, but a spark of something else. Purpose. He remembered Red Hood's words. "If you're fire, kid, then burn." He remembered Deadshot's offer. Give him a target. His flames roared to life, not as a panicked burst, but as a controlled, focused inferno. Michael leaped from the window, descending like a human comet of blue flame, striking the Parademon directly. The creature shrieked as it burst into flames, dissolving into ash. The smaller student was safe. Michael landed, his eyes burning with a newfound determination. He was still scared, but the terror was now tempered by a surge of adrenaline and a burning desire to protect. He was fire, and he would burn. He joined the fray, a searing blue beacon, his flames incinerating Parademon after Parademon, a force of destructive purity. Granny Goodness's eyes narrowed. The Fire Boy, a new specimen, excellent. Bring him to me. The battle raged across the lawns, a clash of two worlds. The X-Men fighting to protect their students and their dream against the cosmic tyranny of Apokolips, come to harvest what it saw as a valuable resource. It was a fight for their very existence and the fate of their dream in this new, terrifying universe. The Justice League was nowhere in sight. They were alone.
The battlefield was the hallowed ground of the Xavier Institute, now desecrated by the fire and fury of Apokolips. Boom tubes flickered and pulsed, vomiting forth more parademons into the chaotic melee. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burnt ozone, the metallic tang of alien blood, and the raw, untamed power of mutants pushed to their absolute limits. The X-Men, battered but unbowed, fought with a ferocity born of desperation, each blow a testament to their unwavering commitment to protect their students. While the primary battle raged on the lawn, another, more insidious threat loomed. Miles away in the heart of Metropolis, Skycops, Jean Grey, and Colossus were engaged in their infiltration of LexCorp Tower. This was a race against time, a desperate attempt to neutralize Luthor's genocidal cure before it could be unleashed upon the mutant population. Security grid is phasing. Jean, you're up, Cyclops commanded, his visor glowing as he scanned the holographic schematics of LexCorp Tower projected by a compact X-Men comm unit. Their jet had dropped them in a secure industrial district, and they had moved through the city's underbelly, avoiding detection. Jean, her eyes still holding that faint internal fire, focused. Her mind brushed against the tower's advanced security systems, firewalls, motion sensors, laser grids. They were impressive, but ultimately, they were technology. Her telepathy slipped through the digital defenses like smoke, unraveling the complex algorithms, creating phantom access points, and briefly disabling entire sections of the building. Clear, she whispered, a bead of sweat tracing her temple. The residue of the Phoenix Force within her made these mental feats both easier and more dangerous, the power burning hotter than usual. Colossus, his organic steel gleaming in the filtered light of the ventilation shaft they were using, tore through a reinforced grate with a grunt. We must be swift. My people depend on it. They moved like phantoms through the deserted upper floors of LexCorp Tower, guided by Jean's telepathy mapping of the building's internal layout. They found the primary research lab on the 98th floor, a heavily fortified vault of scientific terror. Lex Luthor, Cyclops snarled, recognizing the distinctive biocontainment units holding hundreds of vials of the lethal retrovirus. Always thinking he's saving humanity by destroying what he doesn't understand. As Jean began to telekinetically dismantle the sophisticated lab equipment, focusing her power on the vials of retrovirus, a sudden surge of electrical energy arced through the room. The lights flickered, and a force field snapped into place, sealing them inside. Intruders detected, a synthesized voice boomed, initiating defensive protocols. From concealed compartments in the walls, LexCorp security automatons descended, heavily armed, autonomous drones designed for anti-mutant engagement. Their energy cannons hummed to life. Colossus, cover, Cyclops ordered, his optic blast tearing through the first wave of drones, obliterating them in bursts of sparks and twisted metal. Colossus roared, his metallic fists smashing through the automatons, crumpling them like tin cans. But more kept coming, their relentless assault a calculated distraction. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the lab, calm and chillingly familiar. A rather bold intrusion, wouldn't you say, X-Men? Destroying a cure that could save so many. You truly are a menace. Lex Luthor's holographic image materialized in the center of the room, sneering. But I anticipated your primitive methods. This lab is isolated. The retrovirus, however, has already been loaded into remote atmospheric dispersers. We are seconds from deployment. A cold wave of dread washed over Cyclops. He's bluffing. Am I? Luthor's holographic smile widened. The X gene is a blight. I am merely eradicating a pestilence, and now you will be eradicated along with it. Back at the Xavier Institute, the battle had reached a fever pitch. Storm, her body a conduit for the primal forces of nature, conjured a massive vortex, sucking dozens of parademons into its crushing depths. But Granny Goodness, with a sadistic gleam in her eye, activated a powerful stun field, temporarily incapacitating Storm. Then Lashana and Stampa moved in, their whips and crushing boots ready to subdue her. Wolverine, bleeding from a dozen cuts, had finally cornered Mad Harriet, his adamantium claws tearing through her armor, but her psychotic cackles and relentless attacks kept him on the defensive. Big Barda, her mega rod humming with power, laid waste to the mansion's defenses, creating a path directly to the dormitory where the remaining students were huddled. Professor Xavier, in his wheelchair, was forced to use his psychic powers to construct powerful mental shields around the students, protecting them from the horrors unfolding outside, his face contorted with effort. Michael, the pyrokinetic, was a whirlwind of blue fire, his powers now unleashed with terrifying control. He fought with a desperate courage, incinerating parademons left and right, but his youthful stamina was starting to wane. He saw Big Barda advancing on the dormitory, intent on breaching the psychic barrier. He saw the sheer, unbridled terror in the eyes of his younger classmates. His heart pounded. He remembered Red Hood's words, "Learn how to really use what you've got," and Deadshot's chilling logic. Point all that fire you've got bottled up at people who actually deserve it. This was it. This was the moment. He channeled every ounce of his fear, every spark of his nascent rage, not in an uncontrolled explosion, but in a focused, devastating attack. He rose into the air, a human inferno, and unleashed a torrent of pure, unadulterated blue fire, a searing nova that slammed into Big Barda. The new god warrior roared in surprise and pain, her armor glowing red-hot. Even she, hardened by the fires of Apokolips, was momentarily staggered by the sheer intensity of the blaze. It bought Xavier precious seconds to reinforce the psychic shield. In LexCorp Tower, time was running out. Luthor's countdown was down to 10 seconds. "Jean, the dispersers!" Cyclops shouted, his optic blast tearing through the last of the automatons.
Jean, her eyes blazing, extended her telekinetic power, not just to the vials in the lab, but across the city, sensing the network of atmospheric dispersers. With a primal scream, she unleashed a torrent of pure psychic force, targeting the structural integrity of the dispersers themselves. Across Metropolis, hidden devices on rooftops and in utility tunnels suddenly sparked, shuddered, and exploded, sending plumes of inert gas, not death, into the sky. Luthor's holographic image dissolved into a pixelated shriek of rage. No, impossible! The X-Men had won this battle, but the battle on the lawn was far from over. Granny Goodness, seeing her targets, the elemental storm and the psychic Jean still on the field, and witnessing the ferocity of Wolverine and the surprising power of the pyrokinetic boy, decided a retreat was pragmatic. Darkseid would be displeased, but a damaged specimen was useless. She would return, with greater force. Fall back, Furies, she shrieked, her voice cutting through the battle. The harvest will continue another day. With a final desperate surge of parademons, the remaining Furies and their drones began to withdraw, disappearing through the shimmering boom tubes, leaving behind a desecrated campus, smoldering wreckage, and the stunned, exhausted X-Men. Cyclops, Jean, and Colossus, battered but victorious, returned to the mansion a few minutes later, arriving by an X-Jet that had been on standby. They saw the carnage, the smoldering craters, the shocked faces of the students, and the weary, triumphant expressions of their teammates. Professor Xavier, his mental energy almost completely drained, looked at Scott. The cure. Destroyed. Scott confirmed, his voice hoarse. Every last drop. And Apokolips, Logan grunted, wiping alien blood from his claws. But the cost was high. The mansion was scarred. The students were traumatized. And for the first time, the X-Men had faced not just human prejudice or technological threats, but literal gods and cosmic tyrants. They had fought for their dream, and they had won. But the fight had just begun.
Section 10. The silence that followed the retreat of Apokolips was not peaceful, but heavy, thick with the aftermath of battle. The Xavier Institute, once a serene haven of learning, was now a testament to a war fought on two fronts. Smoke still curled from scorched earth, debris from shattered trees littered the lawns, and the scent of fear and alien blood lingered in the crisp night air. Yet amid the destruction, a quiet victory had been forged. The students, though traumatized, were safe. Luthor's genocidal cure was no more. The X-Men stood together on the battered lawn, a unified front of exhaustion and grim satisfaction. Cyclops surveyed the damage, his visor dim, his stance unwavering. Storm surveyed the sky, ensuring no residual threats, her face a mask of weary resolve. Wolverine, his healing factor already stitching his wounds, merely grunted, his eyes scanning the tree line. Jean Grey, her internal fire now banked but still subtly present, rested a reassuring hand on Michael's shoulder. The young pyrokinetic, his earlier terror now replaced by a quiet, burning determination, felt an unfamiliar pride in his own destructive power, now tempered by a sense of purpose. He had chosen to burn, not for vengeance, but for defense. Professor Xavier, his mental exhaustion profound but his spirit undimmed, looked at his X-Men, then at his students who were slowly emerging from the safety of the mansion, their fear giving way to awe and a newfound respect for their protectors. We face the darkness of both human prejudice and cosmic tyranny today, he announced, his mental voice calm but resonating with strength, reaching every mind on the grounds. And we stood firm. We defended our home. We defended our right to exist. News reports were already blaring. Satellite footage caught before Storm's final weather dampening showed flashes of the battle, strange winged creatures, bursts of light, and figures in blue and gold fighting with impossible powers. Lex Luthor, on a hastily arranged press conference, railed against the unprovoked attack by the dangerous mutant faction, even as his own failed cure plot became tangled in a complex web of corporate espionage and public relations damage control. But for the world, the narrative was shifting. The X-Men had not attacked Metropolis, they had been attacked, and they had defended themselves with startling efficiency. Even Superman from the Watchtower watched the aftermath with a complex mix of relief and concern. The X-Men had handled a major apocalyptic incursion and neutralized Luthor's weapon, all without Justice League intervention. They were clearly capable, but they were also uncompromisingly independent. He still believed in alliance, in unity, but he now understood Xavier's stance on a deeper level. The X-Men were not just a team, they were a burgeoning nation, defining their own place in a world that feared them. Batman, however, saw the grim truth. Protocol X remained active. The X-Men had proven their destructive potential, yes, but also their capacity for extraordinary heroism and self-sacrifice. He acknowledged their competence, but he also saw the terrifying implications of the Phoenix Force flickering within Jean Grey, an entity that could make Darkseid seem like a schoolyard bully. He saw the latent rage within Wolverine, the unbridled power of Storm, and the tactical precision of Cyclops, and he knew that while they were allies today, their power, their difference, and their distinct ideology meant they would always be a variable in his contingency equations.
The Justice League would not offer them immediate membership. The X-Men would not accept it. Instead, a new, unspoken understanding settled. The X-Men were now a recognized, if controversial, force. They had carved out their space, not just physically, but ideologically. They were not part of the existing power structures, but an independent third faction. A haven for those born different, a school that was also a fortress, a symbol of a dream that still believed in coexistence, even when facing down gods and tyrants. Michael, the pyrokinetic, found a sense of belonging he hadn't known before. He had burned, and he hadn't been judged. He had protected, and he had been accepted. He knew the allure of Red Hood's pragmatic violence and Waller's promise of purpose, but he had seen the pure, unyielding defense of his family. He knew where his fire truly belonged. As dawn broke over the scarred landscape, casting long golden shadows across the Institute, Professor Xavier looked out at the rising sun. The battle was won, but the war for acceptance was far from over. Darkseid would return, Lex Luthor would plot, and humanity would continue to fear what it didn't understand. But the X-Men would be ready. Their dream, once fragile, had endured its baptism of fire. It would continue to grow, a beacon of hope for a new species in a world of gods and shadows, forever watched, forever challenged, but never again unseen. Their legend in the DC universe had only just begun. Conclusion. The Xavier Institute, once an unexpected plantrance, now stood as a defiant monument to a dream in the DC universe. The X-Men had weathered the storm, literally and figuratively, battling both the insidious prejudice of Lex Luthor and the cosmic terror of Apokolips. They had proven their mettle, their powers, and their unwavering dedication to their unique vision of coexistence. They were not Justice League members, nor would they be easily controlled. Instead, they had forged a new identity, an independent, powerful third faction, a sanctuary for mutants, and a silent promise that evolution had come to challenge the established order. Yet this victory was merely a prelude. Darkseid's interest had been piqued, not satiated. Amanda Waller still saw untapped assets, and Batman's contingencies for Jean Grey's nascent Phoenix power and the X-Gene's unpredictable future would only grow more robust. The X-Men had won this battle, but their war for acceptance and survival in a universe populated by gods and shadowed by cosmic threats had only just begun. The dream of Xavier, now firmly rooted in the DC Earth, would continue to inspire, challenge, and perhaps one day, transform a universe that had believed it had seen it all. Hope shines brightest in the darkest night. More stories await.